What's up, everyone? Ryan Larkin back again for another daily fantasy racing quick picks on the Mayo Media Network. This week, the NASCAR Cup Series is off. They are actually getting one off week this year, and it just so happens to be this week. So we're going to shake things up a little bit and bring you F1 edition of the daily fantasy racing quick picks. Formula One is racing in Montreal, Canada this week. One of my favorite circuits, probably is my favorite circuit that F1 races on, and one of the most historic, got some of the best races all time here in Canada. So really excited for this race. Gonna spend a couple minutes on kind of Formula One scoring and how it works for DraftKings. Try to give you a little bit better idea how to play, because I know it's such a new sport. We've only had 8 races of it, so give you a little insight on that, and then give you a couple of my favorite plays for this weekend. Um, as always, please like this video, subscribe to the Mayo Media Network here, and then follow me on Twitter at Larkin8. Do all those cool things for us and help us build what we're doing here. So let's kind of get into Formula One on DraftKings. So the biggest thing with this sport is to understand the scoring. It's kind of tricky. It's unlike any other sport, really, in terms of DFS purposes. It has a captain mode, or essentially it is a captain mode. It has a captain spot in terms of lineup building. So if you've played captain mode stuff, you'll be familiar with that. But the way you score points isn't linear, I guess is how I would say it. So Formula One in real life, their scoring only pays to the top 10 positions. There are 20 cars on track. And there's 10 teams. So we'll get into constructors in a second, but essentially there's 10 teams and each team has 2 cars. From there, the top 10 cars score points on race day. First place scores 25, 10th place scores 1. And obviously there's got to be gaps in there because 25 to 1, can't be with 10 cars. So drivers 11th through 20th don't score any points for finishing position. So that's a big factor into the point scoring as well for DraftKings. So there's a lot to kind of unpack and break down when you are building a lineup and what you're looking for in terms of scoring. So first place scores 25, and then it drops all the way down to 18 points for second, 15 for third, 12, 10, 8, 4, 2, and 1. All right. So when you're looking at players, when you're looking at what you're building a lineup with, you have to keep that in mind, what their potential is for scoring position. And then there's also other factors of scoring as well. One of the major things that DraftKings did is they implemented a beat your teammate score. Basically, if you beat your teammate, you score 5 points, which is the way you separate drivers in DraftKings Formula One scoring. So Lance Stroll, Sebastian Vettel, both drive for Aston Martin. Both usually finish on the edge of the points, but usually outside the points playing positions. So they score the same amount. The only thing that separates them usually is the teammate bonus, those 5 points. And the same thing goes for Haas F1, which has Schumacher and Magnussen, Williams. But every team has this under their consideration, but it's much, much bigger for those teams that are value plays for us, essentially, with the way pricing sits, because it's the only way to separate themselves really from the other 7, 8 drivers in the value tier. There's a bunch of guys 5,000 and below that all most of the time, most weeks have the same scoring upside. So it's a little tricky. You have to understand what their potential is and kind of what you're looking for, and then kind of go from there. So that's an important factor. And then the other factor, which I kind of alluded to a second ago, is constructors, which is the teams themselves. In Formula One, they're called constructors. So there's 2 drivers per constructor. So Vettel and Stroll, like I said, were both drive for Aston Martin. That is a constructor. So in our DraftKings lineup, we get to pick a captain, 4 flex spots of other drivers, and then a constructor play. That constructor plays most of the time. You're going to want the highest scoring constructor. Occasionally, you can play like the second or third highest if salary equals up right, and those 2 drivers within that constructor can finish high enough and score enough points. But for the most part, you're kind of looking for the highest scoring constructor. If a team like Red Bull has the race winner and the other driver crash out or have a mechanical issue, so only one of their guys scores points, that really opens things up for other constructors to come into play. So a lot of different kind of moving parts that you're not necessarily used to in terms of lineup building. Definitely constructors, obviously kind of a new one where you're picking a team. Flex spots, we're all used to that, but that captain spot is really where you make hay in Formula One in terms of DFS scoring. So most of the time, the most important thing to do with your captain spot is to play the race winner. They're going to score 25 points for winning the race. There's points to be scored for leading laps. I believe it's 0.1 for each lap led. So if the driver leads 60 laps, that's 6 extra points. Fastest lap also gets 3 extra points on DraftKings. Most of the time, that's your race winner. Occasionally, it could be the second, third, or fourth place finisher. It can sometimes be other positions, but a lot of times it is the first place score. And then you got some other things to consider as well. But for the most part, the race winners separating themselves by a lot. So that's why they kind of slide in nicely to that captain play. Unfortunately, Formula One is very repetitive. You know who the race winners are most likely going to be. There's not a lot of surprises. This year, it's Red Bull and Ferrari drivers that are really the best two, and it's Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen who are winning all the races. Except for the one that Sergio Perez won. And that was a big shakeup. A lot of people didn't play him for the captain spot at Monaco when he won. So for the most part, we know going into the race weekend who the 2 or 3 people are. Well, so does DraftKings, and they price them way up. So you're really stuck in a tight window when you play them at captain in terms of lineup building with what you can do from there. And a lot of the field knows it, and it can get very chalky as a result. Last week, I took down the big tournament, but I tied with a million people. And I really only doubled up my money, even though I won every contest I was in. So it's a bit tricky, interesting sometimes how F1 finalizes and works out. Some races it gets really awkward and crazy lineups win, and then sometimes the chalk just hits and you end up tying, unfortunately. So with that said, I think that pretty much sums everything up in terms of DraftKings scoring. We'll kind of get into the track itself now. So Canada, the Canadian Grand Prix is held at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, former F1 driver from that part of Montreal, right around the corner. So they named track after him, of course. Great track, good for overtaking, can mix in some strategies. One of the things that really is great for this track is it's on the St. Lawrence River, which in the summer can add some rain, some weather into the mix anytime you're around a body of water that sometimes can happen. So we see a lot of wet weather action like we saw in qualifying, which can shake up the grid, which it did this week. So it can also happen in the race itself. They can say it's going to be sunny right now, and then tomorrow, middle of the day, a rain shower pops up and throws the race in for a surprise there. So it's just got a cool track, good vibe, good layout, good everything that makes for good racing. So I really like the track itself. And with the way the field's set up this week in terms of Charles Leclerc having to take grid penalties starting at the very back and Perez crashing in qualifying starting mid-pack. And, those are 2 guys that finish top 3 almost every week currently, and they're starting way in the back of the field. And many other shakeups happened that should give us a good race in the middle of the field, which I'm excited to watch. Track's 2.7 miles in length, not super long in terms of F1 tracks. So we get 70 laps, which gives, Verstappen a lot of laps to lead, some extra points available compared to some other circuits. And overall, I think it'll be a good race. If you're looking to see who's winning, might not be. But in the midfield, I think we'll have a lot of passing and a lot of things happening, which will kind of spice things up for DraftKings. With that said, I guess let's go ahead and jump right into the plays. Obviously, I've alluded to Max Verstappen being my pick for the win. We usually give out a Dominator pick for NASCAR. Well, it's essentially what I'm doing here. Picking the Dominator race winner in Max Verstappen. He sits at $16,800 for your captain spot, eats up a ton of salary, or $11,200 if you're looking to find a way to play him at flex. It is possible that you play someone else at the captain spot and drop him in the flex to build a deeper lineup, get another driver who finishes, top 3 or something like that. That is definitely viable. You just really have to crunch the numbers and project out and see how that's going to work out. For the most part, though, I think we're going to see Max Verstappen be super heavily owned in that captain spot, probably 60% owned, maybe more. It's probably going to be a big number. So we're going to see a lot of chalk, a lot of ties potentially, unless some weird stuff happens in the midfield. Verstappen's got a clear path to victory. best driver in the world right now. Starts on pole, no real challengers right next to him. So don't see a whole lot of reason to not see him winning. If you're looking for a pivot, Carlos Sainz starting third in a Ferrari. He's probably the second most likely driver to win this race. So if you're looking for a pivot, that's a good option, and the Sainz will actually free up some salary. So that's a good thing too. Not much else to say on Max Verstappen. He's the man, and he should go ahead and just dominate this race. From there, I'll go ahead and give you my favorite value play of the slate. Sebastian Vettel started the weekend looking like he was a top 8 car. Then the rain came, and he was top 3 in practice. Looked great, and then qualified 17th. There's no real reason for why he qualified 17th. The car just didn't respond like he wanted to. But that gives him a lot of place differential opportunity, a lot of things he can do from 17th. I think you can see him march through the field and still score points, finish 9th, 10th, score a couple points in terms of finishing position, but also get a bunch of place differential points. One thing I didn't allude to or mention before was the place differential point scoring. If you pass 3 cars, you get 2 points. If you pass 5 cars, you get 3 points. If you pass 10 cars, you get 5 points. It also works in reverse. So if you lose 3 positions, you lose 2 points. If you lose 5 positions, you lose 3 points, right? So, Fernando Alonso starts second. I don't think he's going to finish top 3. I don't think he's probably going to finish top 5. He may fall back to 6th or 7th. And if he falls back to 6th, he's going to be sitting on negative place differential points that will actually drop his total down some. So something to consider there when making lineups as well. I think Vettel grabs at least 3 place differential points. I think he's a guy that can get 3 place differential points, finish in the points, which would be really, really good as well, and beat his teammate Lance Stroll. So I think Vettel's going to come in with a pretty decent score at the end of the day. And at 5,000, in terms of flex play, it's pretty affordable. That's really, really good. So I think Vettel offers really good value. And I think he's going to end up on the optimal if everything goes well. I think his car's really strong. It's just now he's got to battle through the field. So that'll be interesting to watch. If you're looking for a pivot, this is where F1 scoring on DraftKings is important. If you're looking for a pivot, you just pivot straight to his teammate Lance Stroll. I believe Stroll's 3,400, so super cheap. He's one of the cheapest drivers on the slate. And he's when you're doing these pivots, you're usually doing it because you think Vettel's not going to hit, or you think Vettel's really realistically going to have an issue, mechanical failure or a crash, which then basically sets Stroll up to be optimal. I mean, that anytime a super cheap value, the bottom tier guy gets a teammate bonus and gets some place differential like Stroll probably will, they're going to be optimal. So if you're looking for a quick pivot, Lance Stroll's the guy from there. Fade of the week. It's tough this week because there's a lot of scenarios where a lot of guys can pay off. But this week I'm going with Val Terry Bottas. So Val Terry he's been a top 10 guy almost all year. But we're seeing a lot of reliability issues with Alfa Romeo, and he is struggling getting practice time in. He missed all of the second practice session. He's missing basically 1 practice session a week. Seems like he's getting further and further behind, and his teammate is actually on pace with him this weekend. So I think there's a possibility that his teammate beats him. Even though I still pick Bottas to beat his teammate, there's still that possibility. I don't see him getting too far forward in the race in terms of finishing position. And at $7,400, he cannot really pay off his price unless he's finishing at least 7th, most likely 6th is what's going to be needed. Too many good options, and you don't want to tie up $7,400 in salary when you got to pay for Max Verstappen or those type of guys that are super high in salary. So not a big fan of that play. I don't see the upside working out. He probably needs a lot of carnage in front of him. And even in that situation, there's probably other guys that are going to benefit from it as well. So not a big fan of Bottas. I think it's a hard path for him to be optimal. So I'm going to fade him this week. So that'll do it for us. Appreciate you guys checking it out again. Of course, like the video, subscribe, check out everything the Mayo Media Network does. Leave a comment. Let me know. Let us know what you think of the F1 deal. Give us your thoughts. Let us know how everything's been going. And of course, for my content, follow me on Twitter at Larkin8. Of course, you can check us out at dailyfanracing.com. That's where I do all my content. This weekend, we'll have everything in terms of, driver breakdowns, projections, rankings. We'll do our podcast with Brett Appley, so we'll be doing that as well. So we'll have all the content covered for the slate. If you want more of it, definitely check us out there.